The moment Jesus took his last breath on the cross, the world was plunged into darkness. The temple curtain was torn, the earth trembled, and tombs broke open. All of Jerusalem was gripped with fear and confusion as people witnessed this shocking event. But amidst the chaos, one crucial question remained. Where did Jesus go? Many believe that Jesus immediately ascended to heaven. Since he declared, "It is finished," before he died, it is assumed that he went straight to the Father. However, a closer look at the Bible reveals passages suggesting that Jesus may not have gone directly to heaven. In particular, 1 Peter and Ephesians mention that after his death, he descended to the lower parts of the earth. Was this merely a metaphor, or does it mean that he actually went to Hades, the realm of the dead? The early church believed that Jesus spent 3 days in hell before his resurrection. Even the Apostles' Creed states that he descended into Hades. But what does this mean? Why would Jesus need to go to hell? And what did he do there? Some theologians interpret this as Jesus preaching to the souls in Hades. 1 Peter states that Jesus made proclamation to the spirits in prison. This could mean that he offered salvation to the righteous souls who had died before his sacrifice. Others believe that Jesus was not merely preaching, but waging spiritual warfare against Satan, breaking the power of death and taking dominion over the underworld. This remains one of the most debated mysteries in Christian history. If Jesus truly descended into hell, what did he do there? Did he proclaim the gospel, or did he engage in a final battle with Satan? And how does this mystery impact our faith today? Now, let's explore the biblical evidence and historical interpretations to uncover the truth. If Jesus truly went to hell, what did he do there? Did he preach to the souls trapped in darkness, or did he engage in a spiritual battle against Satan? What do you think? If Jesus truly went to hell, what did he do there? Did he preach to the souls trapped in darkness, or did he engage in a spiritual battle against Satan? To understand what happened after Jesus' death, we must examine the scriptures. One of the most important verses on this topic is found in 1 Peter, where it states that Jesus went and made proclamation to the spirits in prison. But who were these spirits? Early Christian scholars have interpreted them as fallen angels or souls from the pre-flood era who had been judged by God. The passage implies that Jesus had a specific purpose in visiting them. Another key verse is in Ephesians, which states that Jesus descended to the lower parts of the earth. Is this phrase just symbolic, or does it confirm that Jesus actually entered hell? In Jewish tradition, the realm of the dead was often referred to as Sheol or Hades, and the New Testament uses similar terminology, reinforcing the possibility that Jesus truly went there. Additionally, Psalm 16:10 says, "You will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor will you let your Holy One see decay." This Old Testament prophecy is often linked to Jesus' death and resurrection, suggesting that he temporarily entered the realm of the dead. In Revelation 1:18, Jesus proclaims, "I hold the keys of death and Hades." Does this mean he asserted divine authority over hell during his descent? Historical records also support this belief. Early church fathers, such as Irenaeus, 2nd century, wrote that Jesus descended into Hades to free the righteous souls who had awaited salvation. Tertullian echoed this, stating that the descent into Hades was a significant part of Christian faith. These accounts show that Jesus' descent into hell was widely accepted as a foundational belief among early Christians. When examining the beliefs of the early church, it becomes clear that Jesus' descent into hell was not merely symbolic. The Apostles' Creed explicitly states that he was crucified, died, was buried, and on the third day, descended into hell. This provides strong evidence that the early church did not view this event as a mere mythological element, but as a real occurrence. Additionally, the writings of the Apostle Paul and early Christian leaders reinforce this concept. Some historical documents suggest that Jesus opened the gates of death and liberated the righteous souls. This implies that Jesus did not simply descend into hell, but carried out a significant mission there. For early Christians, this reinforced the idea that Jesus' death was not just a sacrifice, but an event that brought profound changes in the spiritual realm. As church history progressed, this belief became more systematized, and Jesus' descent into hell became a fundamental part of Christian doctrine. Although some modern denominations do not emphasize this aspect, it was undeniably central to the faith of the early church. If Jesus went to hell, what exactly did he do there? This question has been a subject of debate among theologians and scholars for centuries. Some believe that Jesus descended into hell to proclaim the good news to the souls who had died before his crucifixion, while others argue that his descent was not about preaching but about a divine battle against the forces of darkness. One interpretation suggests that Jesus went to hell to preach the gospel to the spirits who were imprisoned there. The Bible states in 1 Peter that Jesus went and made proclamation to the spirits in prison. Who were these spirits? Some believe they were righteous people from the Old Testament era who had died before the coming of the Messiah. Since they had never heard the gospel, Jesus' descent into hell was a chance for them to receive salvation. If this interpretation is correct, Jesus' presence in hell was not about suffering, but about offering redemption and bringing hope to those who had awaited the fulfillment of God's promise. However, another interpretation takes a different approach. According to this perspective, Jesus' descent into hell was not to save souls, but to engage in spiritual warfare against Satan and the forces of darkness. The book of Colossians describes Jesus as having disarmed the rulers and authorities and triumphed over them. This passage has been interpreted to mean that Jesus descended into hell to claim victory over death and break the power of sin. Rather than preaching, he was demonstrating his divine authority by overthrowing Satan's rule. Which of these interpretations is correct? Could both hold some truth? Theologians continue to discuss and explore this mystery, with different Christian traditions offering varying perspectives. What remains clear is that Jesus' death and resurrection were not only a turning point for humanity's salvation, but also a defining moment in the cosmic struggle between good and evil. What do you think? Did Jesus go to hell to proclaim salvation, or was he there to claim victory over the forces of darkness? And what does this mean for our faith today?
The interpretation of Jesus' descent into hell remains one of the most debated theological topics. Some scholars argue that the concept of Hades is merely a symbolic expression and that Jesus never actually descended into hell. Others, particularly within traditional Christian doctrine, emphasize that this event is a crucial part of Jesus' victory over sin and death and take it as a literal occurrence. This debate has persisted throughout Christian history. Modern theologians have proposed several interpretations regarding Jesus' descent into hell. The first perspective is the traditional belief that Jesus preached the gospel to the souls in Hades. According to this view, Jesus extended salvation to the righteous souls from the Old Testament era. Since the fullness of salvation was not yet realized before Christ's sacrifice, this interpretation suggests that Jesus' descent was necessary to bring redemption to those who had died before his crucifixion. The second perspective suggests that Jesus' descent into hell was not to preach, but to engage in spiritual warfare against Satan. This interpretation is based on the passage in Colossians that describes Jesus as having disarmed the rulers and authorities and having triumphed over them. From this viewpoint, Jesus' descent into hell was a divine conquest, where he broke the power of death and overthrew Satan's dominion. This perspective aligns with the concept of spiritual warfare in Christianity, portraying Jesus' death and resurrection not just as a sacrifice, but as a victorious battle. The third perspective asserts that Jesus' descent into hell is merely a figurative expression and did not literally take place. Some Protestant scholars argue that the concept of Jesus descending into Hades was developed during the Middle Ages and is not explicitly supported by the early New Testament texts. According to this interpretation, the term descent is simply a metaphor for death rather than a literal event. Ultimately, how one interprets this event remains a matter of faith and theological perspective. The reason this debate continues is that the event holds significant meaning in Christian theology. Whether Jesus' descent into hell was a literal occurrence or a symbolic reference, what remains undeniable is that he conquered death and rose again. For modern Christians, the most important question is not just whether Jesus descended into hell, but what his sacrifice and victory mean for our faith today. Reflecting on his triumph over death and considering its impact on our spiritual lives may be the true essence of this discussion. The interpretation of Jesus' descent into hell continues to be a subject of theological debate. Some scholars argue that Hades is merely a metaphor and that Jesus did not actually descend into the underworld. Others, particularly within traditional Christian beliefs, emphasize that this event signifies Jesus' triumph over death and hold it as a key doctrine of the faith. Furthermore, modern Christian denominations differ in their views, with some taking a literal interpretation of this event and others considering it symbolic. Regardless of the interpretation, what remains central to Christian belief is that Jesus' death and resurrection completed his divine mission. Whether he physically descended into hell or not, the ultimate truth is that he conquered death and rose again, which is the foundation of Christian faith.
The idea of Jesus descending into hell has been a central topic in Christian theology for centuries. Whether this event was about preaching salvation or engaging in spiritual warfare, what matters most is that Jesus triumphed over death. Now, the question is left to you. Did Jesus truly descend into hell? What do you think he did there? And how does this impact your understanding of his sacrifice? Let us explore these mysteries together, seeking deeper faith and understanding.